from an undisclosed location in the Great Western Desert in the land of the free and autonomous Native American people, the 2024 presidential campaign leader next time to return all US land back to their rights owners. This is the Ben Zion Podcast. Techno-communism will win.
Welcome back to the Ben Zion Podcast. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what is called doomerism. I don't really understand how a person saying the thing that is true, that the planet is very well dying. You know, many of you probably saw a headline that has been circulating that says, by 7 of 8 benchmarks, these ecological systems are becoming unlivable for humans and mammalian life. The only one that's still within reasonable parameters, not great, but reasonable parameters, air quality. Everything else, pollution in aquatic systems, sustainability of those aquatic systems, everything this is a collapse of our species. So why are you saying the thing that is true but unpleasant? Why is that dismissed or characterized as alarmist? It's true. I was talking about how I got in an argument with internet Maoist on Twitter.com, who was, basically pushing back against the idea of supporting plant-based things in the interest of reducing this, not the number one cause of climate change. That's petroleum products and things like this. But it's pretty well understood now within the last 15 years that livestock systems are the number 2 cause, and it's every few months they're realizing that it's closer than they ever thought. So it could prove to be number 1. So when a person says you should be plant-based, and then a communist, the only people on the planet who are really consistently talking about building a sustainable and humane economic system, when a communist and a person pretty well known for, say, being so far left himself that they're criticizing the most fully realized socialist state, certainly large socialist state in existence today, China, which has problems. Everybody knows that no place is perfect. This is what the Maoist's whole personality is, wanting China to be more like it was in the 20th century. And what's the problem with that? Well, the problem with it is it's like a lot of things. If you're a Westerner doing this, you're effectively running interference for the U.S. imperial fascist projects. You are convincing people to look with disdain at a socialist country, and CIA talking points of 100 varieties of this kind abound. The net result is that real criticisms of the West and the United States are set aside in favor of these talking points, which are very permeable, right? It's very amorphous. Just this, as a situation calls for the fascist talking point to muddy the waters just enough to allow issue X, Y, or Z to be overlooked, then that's what's done. People often forget that fascists are extremely malleable in this way. They have no principles at all. They only really care about manipulating, and they'll pretend to be your comrade in service to that. A good example of this is the server farm, this a chatbot and a sock puppet, online sock puppet boiler room that serves the animal product lobbies, and their job is to just jump into every conversation or have entire personas who appear to be, they don't care if these personas look like they're some kind of a leftist or a person on the right side of history on one thing, as long as they stick to and advance the specific talking point that props up their industry. They know that one person pretending to be a Marxist is not going to cause Marxism to become a thing, but it could help them keep this ecocidal stranglehold that they have on U.S. marketplace. And that's precisely what it is. I'm not saying that this Maoist friend is that person, but this boiler room itself is a pretty good example of this kind of a situational malleability of the fascist master manipulator. we have to try and be a little smarter because this planet is dying, and we need to be using emerging technology, most particularly advanced algorithms, to build a humane and sustainable economic system. We don't have a lot of time, so that's why you should support revolutionary communists and dismiss people of the capitalist class. Just dismiss them as if they were just trash to be ignored, because only revolutionary communists have ever done this thing. That is, managed to escape this stranglehold, to escape the clutches of the capitalist institution and build something in defiance of it. And when they have done this, things were better. Life expectancy doubled in just a few short years in the Soviet Union. Life expectancy doubled in just a few short years in China and other countries where it was undertaken. And in the West, where socialist influence has waned in recent years, it's not a coincidence that life expectancy has fallen off a cliff. It's not improving, as opposed to under socialism when it was. But your life expectancy from birth, if you're born now, is not maybe a meaningful metric. If you're a young person now, because the planet might be dead in 15 years. You might be breathing your last gasps of oxygen. The ocean might already be dead, and these things, might be completely falling apart. There's a lot of evidence to suggest this. I'm going to read a few headlines that are indicative. I'm not going to read the stories, but are indicative of the problem of American consumerism, which is the chief driver of this intransigence and not building a sustainable economic set of institutions. Plastic containers still distributed across the United States present a health danger. This is from The Guardian. Not a leftist paper, but sometimes does release things that are factually correct. So, there's a huge number of plastics in the ocean. The ocean is dying because of a lot of things. Most particularly, or one major thing is just corporations having no compunction whatsoever in just dumping whatever disgusting waste products into the ocean that might suit them. I'm going to get to a headline that's suggestive of this. I will read that story, but ordinary consumers are upholding these ecocidal concerns, these ecocidal corporations, by their own habits. When a communist says the problem isn't me using plastic, the problem is corporations producing plastic. Who the fuck do you think is using all this plastic? So it's difficult to remove plastic from your life. You don't have a lot of options, but you can. One thing you shouldn't be doing is encouraging people to do bad things because you want to create some rationalization for your own behavior. If you don't have to have a fucking opinion on everything. If you can't find your way to saying the most anti-capitalist thing in any given situation, keep your idiot fucking mouth shut. I don't understand why this Maoist was just basically vomiting up a bunch of capitalist talking points, and some 600 people like this comment, like this statement about its anti-vegan statement. It's a fucking idiot, This is a person, no statement of this kind is ever going to be looked at, as time wears on and people realize the gravity of the problem and the causes of these problems. No statement of this is ever going to be looked at like, oh, he was really smart doing the right thing there, But people still, most communists in the West are people who are trying to seem almost intentionally trying to be as capitalist class friendly as they can, while still calling themselves communists. So whatever they'll say a bunch of shit about how they like religion and support religion. One of the vast primary cultural scaffolding that's upholding U.S. fascism, where they'll talk about consumer products, they'll brag about eating a cheeseburger, brag about driving around in their SUV. For the most part, the left and communism in the West is an aesthetic more than actual serious considerations of the problems that we face trying to change these things. And that's pretty disgusting. A couple of other little headlines. So are people reducing this plastic consumption? Almost every single one of these plastic products could be replaced with wax paper, wax cardboard, glass. Maybe not too much, hopefully. But people aren't really demanding this, and so we continue to kill the planet. We continue to have an absurd level of consumerism here in the West. You'll see this headline from time to time. It says, the rest of the world, the developing world, cannot, the planet will not be able to sustain the blow that occurs if the rest of the developing world adopts the Western and U.S. consumerist model. So if everybody else starts living the lifestyle that you fucking live, the planet will die in a short time, is the general idea there. And people say, well, that makes sense. Westerners will say, well, but at the same time, they're making no effort to themselves stop living that life. Virtually no effort. It's a horror film we're living in. Cutting boards can produce microplastics when used to chop foodstuffs and vegetables. So you're having your plastic cutting board that you thought was pretty safe and cool to use, but when you're using that sharp blade, you're releasing little plastic microbeads into your food. One of the less healthy things for you to do. Are these plastic things being recalled? Is there a push to end these things, even though they're killing the ocean and harming you physically? No, people they're more invested, even communists, they're more invested in these consumer products than they are in staying alive or in living the truth of their own beliefs in the case of communists. Here's another one that almost no one will respond appropriately to. You've probably seen this one too. Chemical widely found in commonplace sweeteners, sucralose, this petrochemical derivative kind of thing, is now been clearly demonstrated to degrade your genetic material. About sucralose products being recalled, pulled from shelves, sucralose being banned, this company being sued out of existence for making people sick. No, and people are still eating it. People read this headline, then they go and pour their little pink packets into their drink 5 seconds later, or buy a soda that has it in it. So no one is behaving appropriately with respect to their own health or with the ecological system in the West, particularly in the United States. It's interesting to look at a place like the UK because on the one hand they become even more fascistic in recent years. The Labour Party has moved to the right, more or less mirrors the partisan shift in the U.S. The Republicans became fascists, the Democrats became Republicans. Same thing with the Labour and Tories in the UK. And you have something like Brexit, which can really only be understood as a maneuver on the part of evil master manipulators like Steve Bannon and many others from the U.S. To kind of run a Cambridge Analytica type op on this country, which is regarded to be a close ally of the fascist USA, unfortunately, and move them away from the European sphere of influence, which is itself of the capitalist class, but not imperial fascist friendly to the same degree. So they left that organization to become more of the lapdog of the United States. It's really the only thing that makes sense. And say, oh, it was voted on by referendum. People weren't voting specifically to become the U.S. fascist collaborators. No, they were manipulated. That's the Cambridge Analytica type thing. But on the other hand, compared to the U.S., certain cultural things are a good deal less fascistic. So something like pushing up to now like 40% of people in the UK have adopted plant-based diets. It's becoming incredibly commonplace to replace these things with plant-based products. It's becoming a little more common across Europe to insist on leaving coal in the ground, leaving the oil in the ground, a lot more sustainable energy use there than in the U.S. The UK is not the absolute best example of that, but I guess the UK is not really considered to be Europe anymore, maybe because it's an island, and also it's no longer in the European Union, so maybe it's a part of the U.S. now. Of course not. So the article that I am going to read is putting a number on this set of problems. And this is from phys.org, calculating the amount companies owe for causing global warming. Yes, as this is going to become more and more of a sticky situation for the ruling elites as this time seems to compress, until the collapse of ecological systems, there's going to be more pressure for them to be brought to justice, certainly more pressure for them to be brought to heel as super polluters. And this is by Bob Yurka. A pair of sociologists, one with the University of Milan and the other with the Climate Accountability Institute, has used survey data to calculate the amount companies should be paying in reparations to compensate for activities that have led to global warming. Yeah, and this headline could just as easily say calculating the amount that U.S. companies owe for causing global warming, because the United States, its military-industrial complex is in fact the world's worst polluter. You might assume that this is some big corporation petrochemical concern is the world's worst polluter. That's not the case. They're very, very bad. But the actual Pentagon is the world's worst polluter. But it's worse than that, right? Because the Pentagon also forces the rest of the world to uphold these petrochemical concerns and other super polluters at gunpoint. If you deviate from that plan of upholding ecocidal capitalism, if you try to, so sometimes you're just ignored. There's a UN referendum on the subject of this kind. The United States ignores it. Gets a couple of its allies to vote against it, and so forth. But if you have the bad luck of being in a third world country, the United States is able to characterize as a bad actor. In fact, the United States is a bad actors. Then, if you should try to stop ecocidal capitalism locally in the country that you live in, the United States will murder you. Come to your country and murder millions of people. It's happened many, many times. 40 million people have been murdered by the Fascist USA since the end of the Second World War. So, this should really be specific, not just to companies, but to Western and U.S. companies. They are the culprits. And the Fascist USA is the real culprit. Its military-industrial complex, specifically. In their study, reported in a commentary piece published in the journal One Earth, Grasso and Heed conducted a survey of hundreds of climate economists to learn more about the financial costs associated with global warming and who should be paying for disasters that have ensued as a result. It's only going to get worse. Prior researchers found that it's possible to tie certain environmental events to climate change, the current heat wave in South Asia, or excessive flooding in Myanmar and Bangladesh. Now, as it now stands, governments wind up paying to restore order in such areas, or in some cases, insurance companies pay for those who have coverage. So the Fascist West and entitled liberals, even ones pretending to be communists, like my Maoist friend, destroy the planet. They say, "Oh, it's not my fault. It's a vast conspiracy beyond my control." But yeah, you're still consuming the very products that conspiracy is peddling. So no, it's not beyond your control. The people in the global South are the ones that die for the settlers, the colonizers, the Western consumers, who are the culprits in all of this, effectively. In some instances, no one pays and victims deal with situations by rebuilding themselves or by moving to other areas. In this effort, the researchers suggest that because many companies, particularly those that produce or sell fossil fuels, are involved in ventures that result in greenhouse gas emissions, they should pay their share of disaster relief. Yes, there should be a global, and there's not the legal framework for this, but there should be a global class action suit signed by everyone on Earth, saying that U.S. corporations and the United States government owes this $100 trillion to the people of Earth. The United States and these corporations should be sued out of existence. This story is the beginnings of this. It's creating the understanding of something that could do that. After averaging results, the researchers found that it was possible to assess amounts due from industry as a whole, $99 trillion for the years 2025 to 2050, certain segments of industries and even individual companies. They found, for example, that Saudi Aramco should be paying approximately $43 billion every year, and Exxon should be paying $18 billion a year. These companies should either do right, or they should cease to exist. And that's true of every company, that they should cease to exist. Everything should be in a public trust. That shouldn't be a controversial idea that there are public goods and public property exclusively. That's how you run a world that doesn't die. But an intermediary step would be suing these out of existence. Such funds, the researcher points out, could be paid into a global account to fund property restoration after environmental events, and perhaps to find new ways to slow or even stop greenhouse gas emissions. The pair acknowledge that creating such a system and enforcing it would be difficult, as would managing such a system should it come to exist. But they also note that as the future unfolds and environmental disasters related to climate change become more frequent and more extreme, new sources of revenue are required to pay for them, and billing those most responsible for it, they suggest, seems the most logical approach. The Fascist USA, of course, will ignore things like this. A big part of the reason why the United Nations did not come to be an agency with powers more or less of this kind is because the Fascist United States will strip those powers away, as that's been, the League of Nations, the formation of the League of Nations, its short life, the formation of the United Nations, and many of its failures are just the result of the Fascist West prevailing upon it to make sure that it's not actually able to do any of the good things that it might have otherwise done. We are still mostly talking about a lot of capitalists. Certainly not all, but a lot. Yeah, so, the idea of a class action suit signed by billions of the world's people to bring these predatory super polluters, these ecocidal concerns, and most particularly the Fascist US and its military-industrial complex, the ringleader of all of this, to justice and hold them to account, even if they would just ignore it, still perhaps put enough pressure, if people were to start signing a thing like this, to really maybe change some of these industries and reverse some of these damages going forward.